payments was like never like this sexy use case. Let's be honest. It was like always like, oh, you're excited of payments? This is like weird.
The core of basically everything you see in blockchain. Whatever you do, it's peer-to-peer payments all the time. Doesn't matter if you swap anything or trade anything. In the end, it's some kind of payments in the background.
If you issue a token, it's actually a payment, right? And if you swap through an AMM, that's also a payment. It's a cross-currency payment. So it's interesting that everything actually, as you said, indeed, it all comes down to payments.
Hey, and welcome to my new show, Krippenreiter TV. It's a weekly interview series hosted by me, Krippenreiter, and my regular co-host, Vet. If all goes well, there should be a video published every Monday at 12 p.m. EST time zone. So make sure to subscribe to the channel, never miss a new video. The goal for this one especially is to make sure we talk about the basics first. In this case, it's about what makes XRP and the XRP Ledger special and why RLUSD is a benefit rather than an issue. Hope you will learn something new today, have fun, and enjoy the show. Hey, Vet, how's it going?
Hey, how are you doing?
Perfect. So cool to see you. So cool.
Yeah, doing great. How about yourself?
Yeah, awesome. We had planned to do this for me, especially for a year probably. So I prepared everything. Then all my settings broke down, and then I was like, okay, I have to like rebuild everything, but I have to get Vet on board. So I remember at Singapore, right? I asked you at Apex about it.
Yeah, we were in Singapore and you were asking about it, and it sounded like really good. And specifically, at the time, I feel like it was a really good time because there's so much is going on. It was very evident that so much is going on in the ecosystem. Yeah. So it would be actually really cool for you if you do that and you get all the interesting folks in, and we can just have a good chat with them.
Yeah, that's the goal, right? The goal is to get as few people on board and on stage that I think are like they don't get the spotlight, and a few people that are like really the builders. Probably most of the time, their opinions are so valuable, but there's never a chance to interview them because they are so busy, and I don't think many people really give them a chance to speak. And my goal is probably at some point in the future, maybe December, I will start to actually bring people on board and try to interview them with you, basically to learn something new. Yeah, before we go deep into the topics, maybe we start with a little introduction. And Vet, tell me about yourself for people that are new, maybe also new to our space, especially.
Yeah, so I go online by Vet, and I joined like 2017 into the community, so to speak. Back then with Reddit, and then later on X, actually. That's where my account was created. I created my account actually because of that on X, because all the noise, so to speak, went to Twitter in crypto and this whole bull run. And yeah, fast forward, 2020 came, the lawsuit, of course, and that sort of brought more interest in XRP, what's going on XRP. And I remember stumbling on a post about people doing DEX trading, and that got me like really interested into the XRP Ledger actually, because before that I was just a token investor, so to speak. And the actual technology, I was just like a proxy about what Ripple is trying to do. And since then I learned a lot of cool folks. We built some awesome projects on the XRP Ledger, things like XRP Cafe, and many other tools, smaller tools that I built as well, dabbling around. But also amendments, things like protocol changes, like XLS 46 is one that I was authoring together with other great folks. I contribute to documentation, actually to one of the topics that we will talk about later. And also infrastructure. I run a validator who is also on the DUNL. So I'm also very vocal on X. I love to do education and just be like all over the place. So what I usually love to say is that I'm know things really deep in, like really deep, so to speak, like one siloed thing. But I would say I have done everything that you can do really on XRP Ledger. And that sort of gives me like, I would say a really nice view on the things that is going on the XRPL. And I try to share that with as many people as possible. I think you're in a very similar situation. So yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, well, similar but not the same. Like I think you do a lot more. You have a validator. You have you developed the Ripple USD tracker, pretty well known. Yeah, and well, you worked with TQ as well to get an amendment through, and just generally, I think you are all over the place. Like you represent the community in some sense. Like whenever there's an X space about XRP and XRPL or some Bitcoiners bashing XRP, you're basically always there. Not defending, but educating, really educating about the space and about the details and technicalities about the ledger and the coin, and maybe even about Ripple as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, we have to say that the community in general is what attracted me in the first place to XRP, like back in 2017 even, because they had like all these views about like these quote unquote conspiracies and what's going on with XRP, and look, they're all like together with the banks, and it was like the community was very passionate but also very convincing in just like clearly stating what's going on. And I was attracted to that because it was not just a very, simple shill or something like that. And so I would say we have the best people in the community, in the XRP community. And I love to mingle with them whenever there's something going on, as you said. Yeah.
Yeah, what's pretty fascinating about our community especially is I think the philosophy and also the quote-unquote cypherpunk ethos that many chains and communities have abandoned over time. And I think XRPL and the XRPL ecosystem, because we are not taxing any transaction, there's no middleman, neutrality is at its core, no censorship. These topics are really important. And the community, our community, have understood that this is what makes the XRP Ledger especially interesting and powerful. So if we talk about the XRP Ledger more deeply, what would you say is what not only makes XRPL special, but maybe even what makes it more interesting and even more powerful than other blockchains? Is there anything that you think is really key?
Yeah, I think there's one big theme always with XRP or XRP Ledger is it always did the opposite than the others, okay? And did just go a different route. While other people always added incentives, staking, and there was there was a huge staking culture even a couple of years ago, back then when DeFi came in and so on with Uniswap. The XRP Ledger was never someone who is running after trends, so to speak, but more of observing, more of the, there's no rush. Let's just look at it. And that always stood out because when you talk to people, then they always noted as, why are you guys doing this like differently? And as someone who likes people who basically stand out or things that do stand out from the mass, I think it has like a special appeal to people. And it's not only the technical side, but also the people utilizing the ledger going after use cases. I mean, now it's very popular to do institutional things, but back then it wasn't, and it was more of like, oh, you do institutional, and Ripple was pretty much the only company who saw very early, hey, we want to do the institutional route because this is how we can actually 10x, 100x this industry. And this in itself had a huge appeal to people, in my opinion, while other people were like anti-banks, we're going to, against the system. Ripple was always like, hey, we want to use this technology to work with the system. So always completely different route, completely different thinking. Even with payments, right? It's a very efficient chain for payments and focused on the settlements. There wasn't really like the focus, for a lot of people. They wanted either to have, cypherpunk, store of value, maybe even with Ethereum smart contracts and other things. Payments was like never like this sexy use case. Let's be honest. It was like always like, oh, you're excited of payments? This is like weird.
It's the most basic transaction you can do, basically.
Exactly, exactly.
And if you think about it, payments is at its the core of basically everything you see in blockchain. Whatever you do, it's peer-to-peer payments all the time. Doesn't matter if you swap anything or trade anything. In the end, it's some kind of payments in the background. So to focus or hyper focus on payments is actually pretty valuable, because no one else tried to build a blockchain specifically only for payments. And it's also the terminology also changed. Back in the day, DeFi, for example, like I would say DeFi in its essence is not really AMM and lending, because in the end it's truly what it means, decentralized finance. And when we go back to what we said said earlier, that payments is at its core, then payments is DeFi. Right. So cross currency payments, for example, in its essence, for me, is DeFi already. Like it's enough DeFi to be called DeFi.
It's interesting because it was yesterday in a space actually. We talked about payments, and it was like there was a question: hey, is this like swapping assets, cross currency, auto bridging, pathfinding also payment? It's actually also payment, even technically. A lot of things are on the XRP Ledger just payments. There's like I made like this post, and even like it was in the with XRP comments. A workshop where I called like everything is a payment. If you issue a token, it's actually a payment, right? And if you swap through an AMM, that's also a payment. It's a cross-currency payment. So it's interesting that everything actually, as you said, indeed, it all comes down to payments. And if your blockchain is not great for payments, then you really miss out on a big portion of these use cases. And this is very fascinating that they identified this, the architects of the XRP Ledger, very early on. What is important to keep it like really focused on this, right? Not to be the best in everything, right? But to be the best in things that actually matter. There are blockchains who are even really good for storage, for data storage, like RLUSD, for example. They do like, hey, the IPFS basically as a blockchain, and you can store like NFT data on it and things like this, images. It's fantastic. It's built for storing data or data storages. But that's not a use case that is like as big, and so people went in with the XRP Ledger to focusing on that, and that personally always had like this mass appeal for me as a blockchain versus others. It was always like different. It was always like different in a meaningful way, right? Because you can also be just different for the sake of being different. That's not useful, but it was different in a very articulated and useful way. And it was so obvious that I'm still like, we have this debate that it's a top 3, top 4 chain, right? And people don't see it, and people don't have idea what's going on, even though it's right in their face.
But maybe it's because payments is not on their mind. If people think about blockchain these days, it's always DeFi, like the new modern kind of DeFi, like lending, for example, or AMM. So basically yield, how to make yield, how to earn on your asset that you hold anyway. But if you think it through, like if we look at all the blockchains that exist, like let's say top 20, how many of them are really focused on payments, especially? And I would say, because it's so core, it's such a core issue. There's probably only a few that are good at it, but I think there are only a few, and XRPL being the king in my opinion, who are exceptionally good at it. Like, because everything is just meant, or is just built into the protocol in a way that highlights payments as the core use case.
Yeah, and in a way that how the XRP Ledger is built, if you want to build something similar, you are going to be unpopular, I feel like, because, for example, how the XRP Ledger is built is you really need to have that vision and to see like how the world is going to be in 5-10 years into the future. which a lot of people don't have the time horizon. For example, not adding incentives, right, is a huge statement in itself, because you don't have a taxing middleman. I mean, we have even this guy from VanEck, Matthew, who said, who's the tax collector? So it's for me like very weird, because even like people who should know better, institutional circles, they don't get it. Okay, they don't get it. That is how early it is, and that is how difficult it is maybe to evaluate these things, which is actually opportunity for any investor, to see these things. And nobody did it. So when we look at the XRP Ledger, nobody copied the XRP Ledger, because if you would copy it, then you would need to actually believe in that mission, right? If you just copy the XRP Ledger because you say, hey, yeah, no, incentives is maybe great or whatever, if you don't actually understand why it is great, you will abandon it eventually. And there are many chains who actually had no incentives. They added incentives later. Algorand is actually one of them. I didn't know that. But they had actually no incentive for a very long time, but they added incentives eventually. That's, one of these things that you kind of need to have as a vision in order to follow through. And the XRP Ledger design always was like, hey, we have this vision and we are different, not for the sake of being different, but because we see like how the world is going to be in 5-10 years. What is going to matter in 5-10 years? Is it really going to be that we need like all of these gigantic apps directly on chain, right? Like this full programmability platform like Ethereum and so on. What kind of trade-offs do you have when you have fast block times like Solana? If you look at it of Solana, the node costs are huge, right?
Gigantic, yeah.
It's gigantic. So the question is, laptop decentralization, does it matter? Is it useful if you can, for very low cost, run actually a node for a network or not, right? I think it does. But you need to make like these trade-offs, and I believe we really have an awesome sweet spot of trade-offs on the XRP Ledger, not running all the trends after, and being very deliberate with, yeah, we could do more TPS or something like this if we just like allow bigger machines and just crank up the requirements. But just to say no, it's actually like this is better if we keep it this way. Yeah.
I think there's also a huge misconception in the community that many people think having extremely high TPS is even needed. Like for sure you need more, definitely more than let's say 100 TPS. But do you really need 1 million TPS? Is it really necessary? Because all the use cases that need really high TPS, like high frequency trading, for example, I doubt they will end up on a blockchain anyway because of latency and because of the blockchain having to come to an agreement, the consensus. So this kind of latency is so crucial, no matter how small it is, no matter how fast the blockchain is and how many TPS exist, you will never come to a level that is sufficient for high frequency trading, for example, to happen on the blockchain. It's like, I don't know how it could be possible in any way.
No, you're totally right, because the thing is, latency is physics. So you cannot get around physics, right? You need to send these things around the globe. So, and even with the speed of light, like it's just physics. So there are limitations.
Yeah, and it gets worse the more distributed you are. Let's say all your nodes are on AWS or AWS, and all your nodes are like in a zone in New York, for example. You are actually centralized. Maybe your network is decentralized in how it does its governance, but the node infrastructure is very centralized. So whatever happens in New York, or whatever happens to AWS, which there is a lot these days.
Yeah,
you will end up with a network that's super centralized. For sure, because of the centralization, you will be very fast and you will be able to scale to 1 million TPS, for example. But because you're not distributed, you are not really redundant enough to protect your network whenever something bad happens.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned AWS, always in the morning checking, we supposed that everything is down or something like that.
Right.
And then it's something with AWS. But the thing is that you mentioned is like the trilemma, essentially, that if you want to have high TPS or things like this, you need to admit that you cannot be as decentralized because of the physics. And if your goal is to have actually decentralized, then you need to find a sweet spot, like how much TPS is enough and so on. And at the end of the day, there is no blockchain that can scale to all the TPS, right? So the question is like, okay, knowing that there is like a limit, right? Maybe it's better to use these as like batch settlement layers, right? As much as possible, and then have like second layers like ILP and so on, like, you know, handle like actually with payment channels and things like that. The transfer of it. It makes more sense, right? It just makes sense if you think about it. And that's not an admission that blockchains cannot scale or whatever. It's just an admission of what is useful. Is it really does really every transaction need to go through consensus and things like that? Probably not. And so with that knowledge, how do you design a network? And we see networks who go like full on this, but there's like a project called MegaETH. And that's very interesting. So MegaETH is basically a block. I think it's a layer 2. I'm not 100% sure. But essentially what they say, and they admit this, they say validators are centralized permissioned. So they very deliberate say we centralize the validators very close together, basically everybody AWS in one data center, and just a few of them, right? Just for really high throughput. But everybody can spin up a node, right? So that they can at least receive like the messages and submit transactions. So they compromise basically on who can be a validator, but allow like people to run up nodes. And they're very open with it. It's like no, you know. But as a result, they can push up really high TPS, which is an interesting use case for those who might need it. Which again, you know, shows us that it's like multi-chain. There will be always chains who have maybe appealed to people who want this specific thing, and there's going to be people who maybe, you know, want something else like that.
But then again, I wonder. You said there are people who need it, who want to use it. I wonder how many institutions really want like, let's say it's centralized and permissioned. Why not go with a fork and do it privately? Why do I have to allow basically third parties to host validators in a data center that I don't like? For example, right. Let's say I'm a Microsoft guy and I'm more I trust Azure-based nodes more than AWS, and now you say all of them are in one zone. Even if it's not only AWS, it's very centralized to third parties. And then again, I go back to the point where I think the institutions, rather than going with such a network, why not spin up their own off-chain or even a private one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you see this as well. They do spin up these corporate chains, right? We call them, I think even David made like a post about it, Circle, you know, and then Tether, also like the stablecoin issuers. Again, I don't think they're, as you say, like replacements or anything like that. Because this is something that always like makes no sense for me when people say, oh, institutions or banks, they would just create their own, right? They create their own chain and then, you know, screw you guys. Well, you kind of defeat the purpose of blockchain in the first place then, you know, like what if you understand the actual use case of it is that you have no boss, right? You have no one who is governing it and is the sole king basically of the chain. Then that is the mass appeal. The mass appeal is the neutrality, that you have basically a system that is not skewed to anyone's direction. So actually, I think the bullish thing even for the XRP Ledger, and I know institutions, you know, they come and maybe they're going to run more infrastructure, maybe some of them will be on the UNL and so on. But from an institution point of view, I actually find a huge mass appeal to a chain that I want to use for my institutional business, but I'm deliberately not participating in infrastructure, basically being a DUNL or something like that, because you know I believe people really prefer things and just in general that are not run by their competitors, and in the case of XRP, it wouldn't matter because it's a permissionless public decentralized blockchain. But as you said, with these like more permissioned ones, do you really want to participate in a system that is run by your competitor, permissioned, only that they put people in? It's a difficult difficult use case. We will see like what they will come up with.
And we will, what we also see right now is that many characteristics of the XRPL are actually being copied by these permissioned private chains.
Yep.
For example, one aspect that is pretty powerful, I would say, on the XRPL is its true finality. It's deterministic. So whenever a block is validated and finalized, we know for a fact that it's done. It's a done deal. Like there's no way to reorganize anything or like to exclude any transactions that happened. They are finalized, and this is something I see institutions like as well, and we already see this kind of deterministic finality being mimicked or copied in some way in these more private permissioned blockchains that are as well also again use case specific. Like for example, we see a network that is private and permissioned, but it's especially useful for stablecoins, for example. Right. And some of the characteristics of XRPL are getting copied, like the deterministic finality, but other aspects are less important. So maybe they end up only taking some of them, but at least acknowledging that most of what the XRPL has built into its core is so valuable that even big institutions decide to copy it. Really powerful, I think.
Yeah, you can. I mean, Circle with the ARC blockchain that they have,
yeah, right.
They also use deterministic. Yeah, and in their white paper, they really stated this like, hey, because we want like have finality. And you can argue that Bitcoin has no transaction finality, right? Because you can reorganize the block. You know, even though it's very expensive, of course. But imagine this: imagine Bitcoin would be not popular in the next 5 years, and it goes like down tremendously, right? But it will still just chug along, right? Just normal top 500 chain. As compute gets better, as miners get better, right, and just in general compute, I would say. Maybe in the future, right, where let's say 20, 30 years from now, someone could revisit Bitcoin, right, and say, you know what, I'm going to reorganize the whole blockchain from bottom to top. They could do that because now they have like super superior compute. Bitcoin is just, chugging along, right, just, lost its appeal, and someone could just rewrite the whole chain. And this is like, actually, this is why, people say it has actually no true finality because someone could do that.
It's not 100%, it's 99.9. At some point, the chances of it happening are basically zero, but never really zero.
Right.
So you end up with the scary afterthought that, as you said, it could happen. And because it could happen, I don't think in the end we will see mass adoption in a scale that is truly meaningful on chain. We already see people acknowledging and buying Bitcoin, for example. Obviously, like biggest chain by how many people care about the blockchain and how many people care about the coin. But they really care about the coin as an investment, not really in what it does. I think the peer-to-peer payment use case that was initially proposed to the public via the white paper, this use case really died. I think like we are back with basically a better gold narrative, but the big topic, which was peer-to-peer payment system, this one got abandoned. And XRPL still to this day, I think, is one, if not only the only chain that is true to this initial use case, where I would say, sure, Ripple decided to go the institution way, and they decided to focus on institutions and how to leverage the XRPL in their favor. But I would say the XRPL in its core is in its core basically just a better Bitcoin in the sense that it's more true to the initial core ethos that was peer-to-peer payments. And if we win, we have won on the institution side, but we have also won on the retail side.
And I think specifically the part of that will show it like as a better Bitcoin is not to go with a better distribution mechanism, because mining is a really good distribution mechanism. It's decentralized in the sense that anybody can participate. And you can mine Bitcoin, right? In the early days, specifically, you yourself could do that. And so the distribution of the token is very like decentralized, okay? Instead of like a pre-mine, where you then end up basically with a huge bunch of tokens and then you need to distribute, okay? But the problem is this distribution mechanism of Bitcoin through mining is really great in the time where you distribute the token. Once the token is distributed, you live the rest of your life with the downsides of this mechanism, which is mining. So in the case of Bitcoin, the people who are holders, they need to figure out how are we going to pay the miners in the future? Because just holding will not give them money, and there's no block rewards. They need to have other incentives being paid so that they continue provide the security for the network, because it's very expensive, Bitcoin security. Every day, millions of dollars just being basically sold, right, by miners so that they can keep up this machinery going. And the XRP Ledger is doing the exact opposite. They say, okay, the first phase, right, where Bitcoin is shining, the distribution, we struggle with the distribution because we have a huge bunch and we need to get it out, right? But once you distribute it, you don't have this issue with the mining, because then you have distributed. So at the end of the day, it's the following: Bitcoin and XRP. Once these tokens are actually distributed, do people really care about the pre-mine? Because that's what people say. At the end of the day, then you live only with something that is very expensive, like mining, without even the benefits. The benefit is great distribution. The distribution happened already, though. So with XRP, it's the same thing. You struggle with the distribution, but once the distribution has happened, you don't have that downside, but you profit from the upside. So XRP again here is like forward-looking. Okay, once the distribution is happening and it's done, like we have a great consensus. While Bitcoin goes the route, okay, we focus specifically heavily on the distribution of the token, and then we need to figure out what we're gonna do, So
well, we have to increase the fees, right? That's what they say. Like it's either inflation or like changing the max supply and add inflation in some form, or increase the fees. But then again, if you increase the fees, you are not aligned with what the actual users of the network really wants. And this is again going back to not taxing the middleman. It's again going back to what truly matters, which like back in the day, which was peer-to-peer payments. And if you increase the fees, obviously you will end up with a network that is not aligned with this core ethos. And XRPL is true to this ethos. We have low transaction fees. We have finality whenever we do transactions. It's also permissionless. And whatever we do, we have a certain security because of how the XRPL is structured with all these primitives. It's all built in. Everything is enshrined, like what Ethereum guys are saying, like enshrined. It's all on layer one at the consensus layer. So you can be certain that whatever you do, if it's finalized, it's done. Like it's done in 3 to 5 seconds. It's working, and if this stays true in the future, I think the payments use case will hold true, and we will have a successful chain that will deliver the promise that Bitcoin tried to deliver back in the days with peer-to-peer payments.
Absolutely, I agree, 100%. And we will see this unfold in real time, right? We will see this unfold in real time, and there will be a day where people are going to realize, specifically the people from the Bitcoin side, because right now, and there was like one quote from Charles Hoskinson. I think he was like in maybe even one of MySpace. I'm not sure. It was very back then, like a year plus. And he said, the true test will be the following. Once Bitcoin is not the number one, what is going to happen, right? Because right now you can just do nothing, right? And just be there and people are going to speculate. What is going to happen once you're not the number one anymore? Maybe number 3 or 4 or something like this. Because the idea, just in general, is not that Bitcoin would go away. This is like stupid, to think that it would just disappear. But that other chains would grow faster, right? They would just grow faster, get like more value accrual. And then it would be interesting to see like what they're going to do, right? Are they going to keep that chain? Are they going to do maybe some changes? A lot of people say like the fact that Bitcoin did not do some of these changes to its protocol opened up this whole, field for all these altcoins, Let's say they would have adopted smart contracts, for example. what would have happened to Ethereum, if they would have like would Ethereum exist? Same with XRP, right? If they would have adopted smart contracts, would have Ethereum exist and things like that?
I think XRPL would have lost the payments use case, and Bitcoin would have lost the store of value use case, like the better gold narrative. It would not work with smart contracts the way Ethereum have implemented it. Yeah. And so we have to, like in the future, we have to really think twice or even more about what we add and how we change things, because if we change the wrong thing at the wrong time, we may endanger the core ethos to continue to exist on the XRPL.
Stefan made like a comment that we should actually take it as something good. As one of the reasons, he also moved on to XRP, right? Was that with Bitcoin, he had like this hard fork wish list. He said a hard fork wish list. So basically, all the things that they wanted to add, basically like amendments, you could think, right? That they wanted to add to Bitcoin back in the days, and they had this wish list of things to add. Like even other currencies was like on the list. There's even like a Wikipedia entry for this hard fork wish list of the OG Bitcoiners. And he projected that if by the time they would all get this like through, like implemented, it would take like 20 years or 30 years or something like this, because it's like so slow, so hard to upgrade the chain, so hard to make the protocol changes. And I think we should take this as a good thing. Protocol changes should not be as frequent and willy-nilly as a lot of people maybe want to have. I think there is a really mass appeal to actually not change things, right? As you say, to keep the protocol as it is, and find other ways to add like features instead of like doing protocol changes, because that is, in my opinion, not a good route to do protocol changes. It should be a high barrier.
Yeah, as you said, the sweet spot is important. Like you can't deal with extremes. You can't abandon everything that is obviously good for the network just because there's this one thing you want to keep in the network. But then again, if this one thing is so important that it's worth not adding anything, we go back to discuss how changing anything maybe end up being worse than doing nothing. Yeah. But let's go back maybe to XRP as well, especially because many people that are listening right now, I think, are maybe not so technical. So if you're not technical, you should still, to a certain degree, understand how XRP works, because in the end, XRP is the native coin. It's neutral, and it's baked into the protocol, and it has no issuer, so there's no counterparty risk. But so it's the most important asset and will probably always be. But why should an investor or an XRP holder care about XRP especially? Why shouldn't we abandon XRP for RLUSD, for example? Where's the difference?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that very already with XRP as it stands is solving something that hasn't been solved. I mean, Bitcoin solved that as well with how they how Bitcoin pioneered. But in traditional sense, if you think of gold, right? Gold, other commodities, but specifically like precious metals, who were historically as a form of money, is that in order to make it flexible in terms of that you can be very global, I can send you gold and so on, we all can trade in gold, it's unpractical. So what people do is introducing counterparties in sense of paper gold, right? Paper gold, and people trade paper gold across exchanges and things like that. So ironically, to make gold useful, right, for trading and economic activities, in that case, they strip away from it the most important thing, which is like not having a counterparty. That is the mass appeal for gold. And XRP, Bitcoin, and cryptocurrencies, or math-based currencies, what Chris Larson would say, is very unique. This hasn't existed before, where you have actually value that has no counterparty, is neutral, and is math-based, right? And it's upon agreement of people who agree on these rules. And this didn't exist before. It's something completely new. And something like this can solve a lot of problems in the world. If you think of it, do we have more or less trust in the US dollar, right, over time? Do we think people will trust each other countries more or less, in the future? I think it's very, very clear to say the trust of the US dollar is going down. The trust among each other countries is going down. So in a world where trust or people don't want to trust, right, the best thing is not to trust. And in that case, protocols like the XRP Ledger are fantastic in it because they not only enable this use case, but they expanded upon allowing still these countries to issue their own currency, because own currencies won't go away, right? So we want something neutral, counterparty free, like XRP, but we also want to allow countries to issue their own currency on chain to trade, okay, and still to have their economic activity and their whole deficit, whatever they want to run on chain. And this is where RLUSD is coming in. XRP is covering like a lot of use cases and is doing a lot of things great, but it has also downsides of things that RLUSD or stable coins are complementary towards. For example, the volatility, right? We want actually the volatility because volatility means the price can go up, right? And so people buy XRP for the volatility. But there are use cases where volatility is not good. Imagine you want to use XRP for your payroll or rent. If it goes up 40, 50%, right, it's not great because then you might not be able to pay someone or not if you hold it. So a stable coin in that case makes more sense. Or even, that better with DeFi and collateral. If you have collateral that goes up and, down very violently, maybe it's less, good. You need to over collateralize. It's less capital efficient. So they're real distinct. In their use case, they're complementary. And the XRP Ledger in itself makes it very well. We can talk about auto bridging, for example, to make this complementary use. But XRP in itself has a tremendous use in modern money and finance that we see right now in our lifetime. Maybe that was 50 years ago less an issue, but now it's really a pressing situation. Inflation is rampant, and governments are basically admitting defeat, right, by even acquiring more gold, acquiring even Bitcoin and things like this, which is for me like a sign of defeat, because if you already start adopting these counterparty-free assets, and stable coins are completely different as well, where they fulfill a special need, where volatility and some of the properties are not so desirable. So it's not a replacement.
Absolutely. Perfect. It's also pretty similar to the internet as well. The internet also is a public good. It exists. Sure, you have to pay your provider to get access to it, but in essence, it's public the same way the XRPL is public. Maybe the XRP, one could even argue the XRPL is even more public, more permissionless than internet, because to access the XRPL, there's no one like stopping you. Because it's truly permissionless, you can do anything on the network. You can do transactions. You don't need to code. Yeah. You don't have to know any coding language. You can host a validator. You can host a node. You can do basically everything on the network without asking anyone or paying anyone, except the ledger for fees. And sure, you have to store a little bit of reserve so to not spam the ledger. But even this is it's not to tax the end person that wants to use the XRPL. The reason why it exists is because there's a purpose on chain to be a benefit in the end. Sure, you want the reserve and you want the fees to be low, but in the end, I think these values will go to zero as compute gets better, as the XRPL in the future enhances on a deep technical level, and maybe even smart contracts in the future, like programmability. Not really smart contracts, but programmability will help to enhance what makes the XRPL great without all the disadvantages. That sure, we have trade-offs, but the disadvantages will lower over time.
100%. Very well said. Yeah.
We have already talked about XRPL as the basically better Bitcoin, better money. XRPL as the better blockchain for payments, and RippleUSD as the complementary token that has counterparty risk in contrast to XRP, but maybe a little foreshadowing to the new episode that will launch hopefully next week on Monday. There's one question I want to ask you, and
Price prediction.
Yeah, no. We don't do price predictions here, but it's one that I think will get people interested. On a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being the max, how desperate are we to implement programmability, aka XLS 101, natively in the XRPL?
How desperate?
How desperate?
How desperate?
Are we even desperate? Probably not, but
yeah,
from
I would
a scale
say
from 1 to 10.
1 to 10. So 10 is very like basically
10
needed.
is the max.
Okay.
Super desperate would be 10, and like we don't really care about it would be 1.
Okay. I would say between 3 and 4. Yeah.
Okay.
Between 3 and 4. For the reason of we want to get this right, and the current system works. Like the XRP Ledger is not right now like in danger, and we have already validators pulling basically the handbrake on the things that would make it pressing, which is like passing amendments. But you can see already, I know a lot of people who love amendments, they are like, hey, when are people going to vote on? But if they're not tested, it's tough. So please go test them out, and then, people will vote on it. But because people are not, so the validators, handbrake, let's first test. That's for me less of an issue. If I would have no control, basically, or would know that the validators are chilling right now, handbrake again, then I would say it's a higher on the scale, because again, I see a huge issue with a lot of amendments. I really think we are playing with fire, and I don't want to get in a situation where we cannot really get out of it without like rolling back the chain or something worse. But as it is right now, I would say like a 3-4. We want to get this right. It's something in my opinion, we definitely need for bootstrapping the DEX and things like that. But it is not something that is going to kill us if we are not going to have it. Okay, it's not going to kill us. So I would say a 3-4. Yeah.
Okay. Would you differentiate between the full smart contract programmability and smart extension one? Would you think it would be enough to just add smart extension, or maybe even drop everything and just go with something else like Codius, for example, or Evernote?
Good question. I would say smart escrow, or it's one of the extensions, is a good baby step, like measured steps. I think this was also what David suggested, which makes total sense, to first see how the WASM works, virtual machine. But I think XLS 101 is actually the one that we really want, right? Because that is giving you the flexibility and less amendments in the future, because each new object would need like a new extension, and then you need to figure out where you put this extension on. With escrows, it's like in the finish function. So 101 is, I think, is the goal, right? Is really the goal, because that is, in my opinion, what comes close to having free-form programmability for people who want to have it. Basically, logic put on a pseudo account, and then you can just do the things that you want to do. And I'm actually a huge fan of renaming the whole thing altogether. I think smart contracts, that naming really did bite us. But actually, it's good, because that prompted, in my opinion, the whole conversation. If it would have been called something else, nobody would have cared. I guarantee you. Because I'm yet to come across someone, apart from the engineers, who actually knew what it is. Like 101. They were like, okay, what is it? How much programmability is really in it? They were like, I don't know. So, but it prompted this good discussion, and so to just give us also like idea what is important, what is not important, what should we look out for, what is the community important, for the community important. I know a lot of people are like, hey, my voice doesn't matter. I'm not valid. I'm not an engineer. I'm not Ripple or something. It does matter. It matters a lot, like 100%. It matters a lot. And it just shows that what's important for people. People had like concerns, very clear. We don't want this to be like Ethereum or Solana, which it isn't. But it just shows that we need to do a better job in educating people. You know, they just echo what we have just missed doing. And so I think 101 is, in my opinion, the goal. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of doing like these extensions for each object in itself. Yeah.
Okay, but then why start even? Why should we even care about the many more smart extensions that will probably come in the future?
Yeah, I don't know actually if they would come then in that case.
So just smart escrow, the first one, and the last one?
I think probably it's going to be then the last one. Unless we find something where it's like the smart contract one, like the XLS 101, still cannot do something like, for example, how to upgrade the AMM, right? I think this was always a discussion. How can we upgrade the AMM? Maybe the only way to upgrade the AMM is through a smart extension that we put somewhere. I don't like. There's no this conclusion. I know it's like difficult. You and Mayuka had like discussions on it, but maybe there's a good solution where we can maybe upgrade the AMM with something like this, right? Maybe that's the only way to upgrade some of these native features. Because upgrading native features is difficult. You know, we had this debate is because it's a public good. That's a problem. You know, you need always to account for anybody should be able to do this and have a say, have a vote, have a yada yada yada. While Uniswap, they can just deploy a new contract. You know, they just say this is V3, this is V4, and they decide the rules.
Yeah, thanks, Wet. This was amazing. Like, we talked about so much. We talked about XRP, XRPL, and RLUSD. And in the end, we learned about what may end up on the XRPL to enhance it even further without all the disadvantages. If you liked what you saw, if you liked us talking about all these things, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and follow us for more. Thank you, Wet.
Thanks, Krippenreiter. It was amazing. And thanks, everybody, for listening.
Awesome. Bye-bye.